Happy Wednesday, Penn State fans. We are less than 96 hours away from the Nittany Lions 2025 whiteout game, which, of course, is a rematch of the Big Ten title game. Penn State hosts Oregon on Saturday at Beaver Stadium. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. It's another edition of Blue White Illustrated's BWI Live, presented to you by Academy of Sports and Outdoors. Huddle up, football fans. Tailgate season is here, and nobody will get you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find grills, canopies, jerseys, and more. Thank you to Academy Sports and Outdoors. Check them out, academysports.com. T. Frank, good morning. It is Wednesday, September 24th. Penn State is still a 3.5-point favorite at BetMGM for this weekend's matchup with Oregon. We're going to talk about that later on in this show, but it is a normal game week otherwise, except for one small thing. It feels nothing like any of the game weeks that Penn State has had prior to this one.
Yeah. There's a palpable buzz on the internet, which is always buzzing about something, but now it's a fever pitch. I'm interested to see if the game lives up to the hype. You know, I think, as Nate said yesterday on the show, I think this is an important thing, is win or lose, you want Penn State to play their best game. A lot of times we get into these situations, and I think that there's a sense that Penn State didn't play a clean game, or Penn State made mistakes that were unforced errors, right, as opposed to, like, they play a really good game. I think the game last year against Ohio State was a really good game. They lost in key situations to a team that played really well, but they were in that game the entire time. The offense, as much as they struggled, they didn't score points, they were able to threaten and move the ball late in the game and make it interesting. Like, you didn't think, okay, Penn State has no chance of winning this game throughout the entire thing. They were in all of their games last year, even though I think for fatalist fans, it feels, got people that are saying, until they do it, I don't believe they can win these games. Everyone else felt like they had a chance to win the entire time. And I think that's really, from a good game perspective, you want all of that to kind of play out. Now, ideally, for you and me, like, we do like a little bit of certainty in the fourth quarter so we can start working ahead, but that no one else cares about that other than Penn State fans that want to blow out in their favor.
Yes, well, Penn State could get that. I think there's certainly a lot of paths for victory for both teams in this game, and I think that's what makes it so fascinating to analyze. And when we break down the offense a little bit later in today's show and how Penn State and Oregon match up by the positions, you'll get a little bit of a feel for why we feel that way. But let's first get to what the Ducks have been talking about this week. On yesterday's BWI Live, you got a full recap of James Franklin's Monday news conference, his first one of Oregon week. Obviously, if you missed that, you can see the whole video here on the BWI YouTube channel. And of course, we will have the same footage from James Franklin's Wednesday news conference tonight right here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel sometime later this evening. For Oregon, Dan Lanning talked late late for us, not so late for them, on Pacific time, about 6:45 Pacific time, almost 10 o'clock Eastern time on Monday night. Some of his players then talked on Tuesday. And T. Frank, the biggest takeaway I had is the same one I had talking to those guys at Big Ten Media Day in July, which is that they respect the whiteout, but Dan Lanning and almost every other college football coach, but some more so than others, and Dan Lanning, I think, is closer to the James Franklin side of this scale, just preaches that 1 week at a time mentality. And his Oregon players echo that over and over again, just like James Franklin's Penn State players do. So I think they respect the environment they're coming to. I think they realize that it's no secret that it can cause problems. They have YouTube. They have TVs. They've seen the social media clips of what happens when opposing offenses take the field, especially early in these whiteout games. But they realize, too, that one way that they can take that out of play, so to speak, is to start fast. And I think that's why you heard both coaches talk about that. James Franklin on Monday afternoon and Dan Lanning later that in the evening, both echo that they know that the crowd and how it plays out for the resulting 50 minutes or so is going to be in large part impacted by what happens in those first 10.
Yeah, and, I think fans feel this very, very acutely, especially on offense for Penn State. The defense can go out there, they can get a false start or a delay a game penalty in the first two drives, cause a punt, make everyone hyped, get a sack, whatever it might be, a big play, and then they're ready to explode, and then the offense just doesn't deliver. They don't give you the big play to keep your energy level up, and that's where I think Penn State's biggest issues, with home field advantage and crowd and all those things can come into play, is when you when you have a group of people in the stands that don't believe in the offense, don't believe in the ability for them to hit big plays, and then you reinforce that belief. So, starting fast on offense, I think, is incredibly important, because even if you give up a field goal or a long drive on defense, if you respond with points are the most entertaining and exciting thing in football, and Penn State's got to score some points this weekend.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. The other thing I heard from Oregon players and head coach Dan Lanning over the last couple of days is the idea that they're not going back as much as some maybe think or want to that 2024 Big Ten title game. Can they learn from it? Of course they can. And can Penn State do the same? Yes. And does Penn State maybe have some advantages because because Oregon has the same two coordinators back this year, while Penn State now has Jim Knowles. Obviously, Oregon's familiar with him, faced him a couple of times last year, but once in the regular season, once in the postseason, but different personnel. For Penn State, there is no Tyler Warren on offense. For Oregon, they have a new quarterback. They have new playmakers, from the transfer portal at a number of key positions. So I think a lot of people, Frank, I don't know if you've got the same feeling, but are going back and trying to draw parallels between that 2024 Penn State-Oregon game. And I think the way you went about it, looking at what Jim Knowles did when Ohio State played Oregon, is better use of that 2024 postseason film compared to the Big Ten title game when it comes specifically to this matchup we're talking about with Penn State and Oregon today, or this week.
Yeah, because you have two games and you saw adjustments over time with Jim Knowles, and that's who's playing. That's the matchup that is actually repeating itself, as opposed to Penn State's players versus Oregon's players, which those kind of pieces swap in and swap out each year, even if there is overlap in retention. The game plan is entirely different. So, yeah, I wrote about that earlier this week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com about how the biggest difference in the and this is why I started the show with this, the biggest difference. Yes, there are tweaks in the defensive scheme. The biggest difference is Ohio State just put up points in gobs against the Oregon defense. They got out to a 30-something-7 lead at halftime. That makes your job so much easier as a defensive coordinator. I think largely they probably had the same game plan on defense. They probably didn't want to play as much man coverage in the first game. They probably wanted to blitz less in the first game. But because it became a dogfight, because it was down to the final couple plays of the game, you've got to start pulling out of the different things out of the bag, because your main plan isn't working. And there are obviously changes and subtle tweaks each time. And I think the defensive effort was better the second time around. But they had a massive advantage of having Jeremiah Smith turn into the guy we're talking about this year in the playoff. Ohio State started throwing him the ball more regularly, and we saw it worked out pretty well for them.
Yes, it most certainly did. And I think that start fast thing, again, it is cliche. There's no doubt about that, right? It is. But you go back to the one thing I think you can pull from, there's a couple other things, but in terms of the box score from that Penn State-Oregon game last year and things you don't want to repeat, here's a good idea. Don't get down 28-10 with 10 minutes to go in the first half. Don't do that, as Black Cat notes here in the chat. Tired of the other team setting the tone like last year versus Oregon. Yeah. And look, Penn State in that game, we all forget how that game started, or at least a lot of people do, but they give up a touchdown. Then they answer with a field goal, a short field goal, 38-yard field goal on a drive that, maybe could have ended up with points, much like Penn State the first 3 weeks of this season did not. And before they knew it, it was 14-3, then 14-10.
They also had two turnovers in that moment. So they were moving the ball, and then they gave up the ball like at midfield on one of those plays.
Yes. So the fast start will be something that is cliche, but continue to talk about throughout the rest of the week. But yeah, Oregon is getting ready to come to Penn State. T. Frank, are you excited for? Yeah. One more thing. Go ahead.
Yeah. About starting fast. I think that one of the things that I think about a lot when it comes to opening game scripts.
Awful transition, by the way. So thank you for that.
Excellent. My inability to keep a thought for later has saved the show here. You have wrinkles and you have adjustments that you want to make, or maybe even in certain situations, entirely new parts of your playbook, like in this game, that you haven't really used or had a need to use yet. They're only a surprise for so long. Right. So on that first drive, in that first quarter, starting fast means all those wrinkles are working for you, and they're getting you yards and points and touchdowns, or they're getting you sacks and turnovers and negative plays. And then in the second, third drive, maybe in the second quarter, the other team has had enough time to adjust and adapt, and those are less effective. And then you got to get into your base game plan. You got to get into, okay, here's what we run all the time. Here's what we do on offense. And if you haven't taken advantage of this, and Penn State, this is the most frustrating thing, is you see from a scheme level perspective, they've done something different. They've added an innovative wrinkle, and then somebody blows an assignment. And it doesn't work. And now the element of surprise is gone. And maybe like a certain percentage of your playbook that you were relying on, or a certain like opening script to get a touchdown, now that doesn't go for a touchdown, and you settle for a field goal or you punt. And like, it's just this, like for me watching it, it's this attrition of the idea drain. And now it's like, okay, now we're just getting into more outside zone. We're getting into more curl flat. We're getting into more of the basic stuff. When you had maybe a double move or something in there and it just doesn't work, then it's very frustrating to watch, let alone, I imagine, call the game from that perspective. So starting fast means executing the thing this week that you're expecting to work.
And that certainly applies to the Penn State offense. One more thing before we move on here from Larry, because I think it ties in to what you're talking about. He says, going back to the Big Ten title game from a year ago, keep in mind Oregon ran up tempo all first half to keep Penn State off balance. How much tempo will they run in this environment with so many moving parts?
Great point.
It's a question, especially early when they have to deal with. There was I can't remember
tackle over tempo.
Yeah, I can't remember the crowd split, but it was definitely in Penn State's favor at Lucas Oil Stadium. Not anything even remotely close to what it'll be Saturday at Beaver Stadium in a whiteout. But point being is that Oregon, I mean, it'll be on Penn State and Jim Knowles to have answers to not let Oregon's up-tempo offense get going. But also, it will have to be operating it for the first time in this environment with a quarterback who has played on the road before. He did so at UCLA. He played at Northwestern a couple weeks ago, for whatever that's worth. But certainly, unlike anything he's going to experience here at Beaver Stadium on Saturday.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, that's a great point by Larry.
Yes, so we'll see how that plays out. Well, this is BWI Live, and if you are still looking for tickets for Penn State, Oregon, and the whiteout this weekend, you can wait until closer to kickoff. Sometimes prices get cheaper. Sometimes you just want to buy right away. Either way, visit Game Time for the best ticket and pricing options for the Penn State, Oregon whiteout. I just looked before the show. The prices keep bouncing around, but the cheapest get-in price before we started this show about 10 a.m. on the Wednesday, September 24th was $378. Here's the key. Yes, that's a lot. It also includes fees. You're not going to get shocked at checkout when your $378 ticket suddenly balloons to $450. You get your all-in pricing right on the checkout page from game day as you scroll and look around the Beaver Stadium seating chart to see what seat may be best for you. Maybe you want to try the temp seats over on the west side. Maybe you're curious about one of the end zones to get a better view of the all-22 like T. Frank likes, or whatever you prefer. Game Time will have tickets for you, gametime.co. So don't be surprised at checkout. Use promo code ON3 at checkout for $20 off your first purchase. My favorite part of the Game Time app is seeing the view from your seats, which you can see at Beaver Stadium. And again, the all-in pricing feature to me is the best thing Game Time provides. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code ON3 for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code ON3, O-N, the letters, and then the number 3 for $20 off your first purchase. Swipe, tap, ticket, go download the Game Time app today or visit gametime.co. T. Frank, Penn State fans are eager as anything to discuss not just this game, but the matchups on the field. And this goes back to the conversation we were having earlier. Oh, and you are too. And I am as well, but maybe not quite as much as you and some of the folks in the comments. But I'm here to facilitate the conversation and discuss what Penn State and Oregon bring to the table across the board. So let me set this up for listeners, whether you're watching live or if you're listening on replay. So T. Frank and I are going to break down the positions on offense and where Penn State might have an edge and where Oregon has an edge on today's show. Tomorrow, the guys are going to dive into the defensive positions and who has an edge for Penn State or Oregon on defense. So our focus today strictly on the offense for Penn State and for Oregon. All right, let's get into it. We're going to start with, no, not the receivers. Of course, we're not going to start with the receivers, even though some of you would like to, and we spent the whole offseason doing that. Yeah. This week's Penn State, Oregon whiteout position preview starts, of course, with the quarterbacks. So Penn
Yeah.
State, of course, has a senior starting quarterback in Drew Aller, who comes into this game certainly with not the prettiest QBR, which I still don't know if that means as much as some people have been telling me it means over the course of the last couple of weeks. But at any rate, he comes into this game, obviously plenty experienced in the whiteout, obviously plenty experienced in games on this kind of a stage. Oregon quarterback Dante Moore, highly regarded recruit who started his career at UCLA. Obviously, not so much when it comes to game experience, either on this stage or in this kind of a road environment. So, T. Frank, let's just set up the quarterback battle here, starting with a look at Dante Moore. Again, started his career at at UCLA, played there in 2023. Ended up redshirting last year and then transfers into the Ducks program to replace Dylan Gabriel. I've enjoyed watching what I've seen on tape from him over the first couple of weeks of the season. Not a surprise given who he was as a recruit. But when you first turn the Oregon tape on, I know you've been watching bits and pieces over the course of the first 4 weeks of the season. Your initial thought on him was what?
Is really, really good. He's accurate, and we talk a lot about Aller's arm strength, but the velocity and the compact nature of the way Dante Moore throws, it's explosive. His arm movement, and it doesn't look like it's an effort thing, but his ability to put the ball into tight spaces, throw on the run, contort his body, and still deliver an accurate or on the frame catch. Maybe not everything is perfect, and he's leading guys while throwing on the run, going 10 miles an hour to the right. Like, it's not all perfect, but he's really good in a lot of different situations, and I feel like deep ball accuracy, and like I mentioned a couple of times, I think that they also have a back shoulder game, which is a difference-making element for a defense when you've got to defend both sides of the receiver. So I know he hasn't played anybody, and that's what everyone's going to say.
Right.
He hasn't played anybody, and his passer rating, his NFL passer rating is still 140. Is really good. He's really good. So, yeah, there's no way around it. He's an excellent quarterback.
Yeah, and Dante Moore is, of course, a guy that can hurt you some with his legs. His rushing numbers this year, not really anything to write home about through the first 4 weeks of the season. Obviously, some of that could be by design, as we saw with Penn State not having Drew Aller move around as much. Yeah. But let me move over to the Penn State side of this conversation, T. Frank. From what I've read on the Lions Den message board, which you of course get access to if you're a Blue White Illustrated subscriber, and if you're not, check us out, $1 for the first week and for a week all year over at bluewhiteillustrated.com/join. A lot of people there, social media, across the podcasting and live showing space here on YouTube and elsewhere, are convinced that nothing else matters in this game. If Drew Aller plays well, Penn State will win. If Drew Aller plays anywhere close to the bad parts of the first 3 games of the season, Penn State will lose. Do you think it's that simple? I don't. Curious what you think.
No, I don't think it's that simple because the environment around Drew Aller hasn't been great either, and we'll get to that more later on the show in players that need to step up. But I'm not trying to absolve him of not playing well. He hasn't been playing well. Even within the confines of Penn State has also not played anybody. They haven't been productive, not playing anybody. Basic stats that tell a story. His passer rating is 96 compared to Dante Moore's 140. So if they're playing comparative schedules and Penn State has been worse by strength of schedule, you'd expect the senior quarterback to be playing at a higher level. We know he's been missing some throws. We know he's been out of rhythm. And the deep ball, I think, is a fair criticism to say, like, the deep ball is not as good. It's not in sync. It's not in rhythm. And it's also not open. So, like, schematically, it hasn't been open. They haven't been... The Oregon offense gets these guys open, and they've been getting coverage busts. Oklahoma State, like, it wasn't just that they were bad at football or they were inferior talent-wise. It's that they were busting coverages and making mistakes and being put in a situation where they were stressed by the offense. And we haven't seen that from Penn State. And I think part of that is fundamental to who Penn State is from a talent perspective, but it also has been a schematic thing where we've seen kind of the same thing a lot from Penn State. I think that when we're talking about, I'm going through some of the things in my head of the examples that make me feel uneasy. The play action deep ball, under center, hard play fake. It's something that Penn State fans have been dying for years to then take a shot. Nobody has bought it so far. Those plays have not been wide open. The goal is the safety steps up and fills because Penn State has 6 offensive linemen and they're going to run the ball. And then suddenly you've got Devontae Ross trying to run deep post, deep go, deep seam route, whatever it might be. and the corner or the safety's on top of him. Then you look at Oregon's offense, and they've got guys running wide open. And I don't know how to square that. I don't know the accuracy from the quarterback, where Drew Aller puts the ball has been overstated, but it's not as good as Dante Moore's. And so there are these kind of, you look at them one next to the other, and you've got a clear narrative on one side, and you got a clear narrative on the other. But quarterbacks they don't operate in a vacuum. So like, it is not just Drew Aller, but it is partly Drew Aller in the offense in some of their struggles on that side of the ball. And that's before we even get into the conversation, which we did all of yesterday's show, and I don't want to get into today, talking about are they saving things? Are there things in the offense they haven't used yet? I don't know. I believe so. They've been saying it out loud. That's the case. And does that make Aller look better in this game? So to me, that's the wild card here.
Right. And I think to your point just a second ago, some of it will come down to how those around him help Drew Aller look better and or possibly look worse. But at the end of the day, some of the throws he makes, some of the decisions he makes certainly will play a factor, and the big chunk of that factor as well. Do you want to make a decision on who has an edge here, or do you want to move on to the running backs, or do you want to make a pick?
Let's do it. That's what we're here to do. Right. So I'm going to go I have to do it. Dante Moore, is the advantage in this situation. For environment aside, what they can do in the whiteout versus what they could do at a neutral field. He's been playing better, and he's not a young player. He's a redshirt sophomore. He's a third-year quarterback. He's been in this offense for 2 years. So I don't want to give him he's the young guy, but Aller is a senior. He should be the better player here. The performance has not been up to the same level, and I don't want to just say the older quarterback who's seen more in a game where there's going to be some of these surprises that we talked about, right? So the opening, starting fast, all that stuff. Aller has not proven to do that much in his career, let alone this particular year. So yeah, Dante Moore has quickly become the best quarterback in the Big Ten. And I don't think it's, as of now, particularly close. Aller can change that in this game, but it's the advantage is Dante Moore.
Yeah, so I look at this a couple different ways. The first one is, I think if you were projecting long-term based off of the first 3-4 weeks of the season, Penn State has played 3 games. Oregon has played 4. I'm with you. I think you would, I think many people would take more long-term, but you're right. I think that Drew Aller does have a chance to change that in this game, and it's just a matter of whether or not he and this Penn State offense take advantage of it. So for this game itself, the edge rest with Aller, just because of who the home team is and what we've seen him do in his best moments. And can he replicate more of those in week 4 compared to what was the case over week 1, 2, and 3, where it was very up and down? And can Penn State's defense help him? Of course, Penn State's defense could make this very easy for Drew Aller, of course. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But I'm with you. When you look at what Moore has done so far, both in the non-conference and then what he did, of course, and one game against Northwestern, but then what he's done also at UCLA when he played there as a freshman. Certainly he has a lot to work with. He was a highly regarded recruit for a reason, and it will test Penn State's secondary. Yeah.
And so that is the thing, right? So everyone wants to say now we're changing our tune on Aller. And it's the evidence, what you see is not wrong. In terms of it is not going well on offense for Penn State to start the year. It isn't looking clean. It has looked clean for a fellow 5-star quarterback coming into this game. Another guy who has a lot of the talent and tool that you're looking for and has been operating in a better environment and has been operating better. I don't think those are going to dramatically change. They will change. They will be muted. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that Dante Moore is playing better and has similar talents to Drew Aller. So yeah, edge to Dante Moore. So yeah, that's it. I don't see that as a contradiction to think that Aller's a good quarterback, but he hasn't been playing well. And also, yes, this is the biggest game Dante Moore has played in, and Drew Aller has also played in big games. And everyone's criticizing Drew Aller's play in big games. I don't know what to do. We can chase our tail on all these arguments.
Yes, and certainly we will before the rest of this week and after the Penn State Oregon whiteout, and we will do that with the film. Of course, you'll have your film rooms over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com in addition to breakdowns here as well. All right, huddle up, Penn State fans and football fans everywhere. Tailgate season is here, and nobody will get you ready for game day like Academy Sports and Outdoors. Swing by your local Academy store or shop online at academy.com to find grills, canopies, jerseys, and more. Be a watch party legend with gear from top brands like Nike, Adidas, and Under Armour at undefeatable prices every day. Be sure to check out the Harrisburg and York locations. As I've told those of you who listened to the show before, I've checked out the Harrisburg one. It is awesome. I highly recommend it. Fun can't lose, and neither can you with tailgate gear from Academy. Check them out at academy.com, or if you're local, at their physical locations in Harrisburg or York. All right, let's get into the next position on this offensive position by position breakdown ahead of Penn State, Oregon, and the whiteout game. T. Frank, it is the running backs. So Penn State comes into this game, obviously, with a two-headed monster in its backfield with Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton. We've talked a lot, and you have talked even more over the last couple of weeks regarding Nick Singleton, his start to the season, Kaytron Allen, and his start to the season. I want to start on the Oregon side of things, though. Yeah. And I should have mentioned this up top when we started with what was being said about Oregon, because they are hoping to get starting running back Noah Whittington back this week. He's missed the last couple of games due to an unspecified injury. He warmed up last week. Dan Lanning made it sound like in his Monday news conference this week that they could have probably pushed it and put him back on the field for last week's win. They did not need to do that. Obviously, the final score indicates as much. But certainly, with him out, they've used Jaden Limer, or actually, let me pull up my pronunciation guide. I screenshotted this just for this moment and then left it ride. Lamar, Jaden Lamar.
Jaden Lamar.
Yes. So I knew I had that thing sitting around for a reason. Has been quite good in Whittington's absence. What do you make of these Oregon running backs through the first few weeks of the season?
They're fast. They're explosive. They're not very big, which is kind of the Oregon. Oregon is big everywhere, but at running back, and I know they've got a power back on the roster as well. But you look back at some of the guys and they run through contact hard. Nate, actually, I want to give him credit for this, said that Jaden Lamar reminds him of Blake Corum, and I was like, what do you mean? But Lamar's not a big back, and Corum, I think, was thicker and a little bit shorter and stockier, but had kind of had that gonna break tackles better than you'd expect. Lamar runs really, really hard. Because of the injury, I'm a little less familiar with Whittington, but I know, just based on his average yards per carry, I'm assuming he's not slow at 5'8", 194. So those guys have the explosive element on the ground. The size is in the trenches for Oregon. We'll get to them in a second, but in the missed tackle leading into an explosive play element of Oregon's offense in the run game is a very real threat. So those guys, I think, break tackles better than their size would indicate, which then leads to those chunk plays that are devastating to a defense that's trying to keep a lid on the explosive passing plays.
Correct. And so the other thing to keep in mind here is that this is not a one-man show. Certainly it can be. I don't think they're afraid to ride the hot hand, but if you look through their box scores, and obviously the scores of some of their games are a big reason why, but they're going to use De'Aaron Hill as well. He's a freshman running back who has 188 yards and 2 touchdowns so far. So him, Lamar, Whittington are going to be your primary ball carriers. Jordan Davison's another guy who has 19 carries on the season, 6 touchdowns so far. So, certainly Penn State has a number of guys it needs to watch for in this contest on Saturday, because Will Stein, as we know, they don't mind rotating guys. They don't mind moving guys around. They certainly will make sure that people that need to get their hands on the ball do get their hands on the ball, and then it's up to them to see what they do with it. For Penn State, not as complicated, I guess you could say, or at least not as busy in that backfield. It's Nick Singleton, Kaytron Allen, and then I'm curious to hear what Stan Drayton, the Penn State running backs coach who speaks with reporters on Thursday this week, has to say about the RB3 battle. Not that it should come into play in this contest, but certainly part of the reason Penn State is, very fortunate that Kaytron Allen and Nick Singleton came back, as nobody has, really grabbed that RB3 job. But again, shouldn't matter in this one. Nick Singleton, as we said, slower start to the season, I think, than many anticipated. Kaytron Allen certainly is taking advantage of almost every carry he gets. And the Penn State running backs, I think, play a huge role in this game. I don't want to say that it's more on them in my mind than Drew Aller in terms of how Penn State wins this game, but I think they get them rolling, and they get
Yeah.
especially, a couple big plays, a couple of those quote unquote special plays that James Franklin talked about that they're looking for 8 to 10 of from different guys a game. It changes the way this one goes significantly. But I don't know if you've seen enough, especially at least from Singleton over the first couple of weeks, to know for sure that Penn State can produce that this week.
Yeah, so I know we focused a lot on Singleton because that's been the part that's been most obvious, having 20 carries last week and, being kind of the goal line hammer. But one thing that I think it's not secondary in the conversation because everyone's talking about how good Katron Allen is this year, but I just want to highlight it here, what he's doing specifically. He has a broken tackle rate right now of 41%. So nearly half of the tackle attempts against him are not successful. He's averaging 8 yards a carry. His explosive play rate, his breakaway rate, looks like Nick Singleton from his freshman season. And again, they're not playing anybody that's necessarily going to challenge them the way that Oregon's defense will. But when we talk about offensive rhythm, what you just talked about and what you just highlighted, the run game providing rhythm to this team, I think that's a real thing. I think that's something in this game that if they establish that in whatever wrinkles in the run game, because we haven't seen a lot of some of the secondary and tertiary things from the run game, they've been doing a lot of the basic things. I put this out here before the show. Penn State is running half as many option plays as they have previously. And I know it looks like every single play is a read option. Some of those are RPOs where the quarterback is reading a second level defender, deciding whether he's going to throw the ball or not. And then some of those are just performative handoffs to try and get those backside defenders, the backside linebacker, the backside defensive end, to pause for a second because you're pretending there is an option. Now, that's not all of them, but it's at half of a rate as it was to last year. So, do they lean into that more? Do we see a Wildcat quarterback come on the field? We haven't seen any of these things from the run game that can steal you conversions, third down. Penn State's been trying to be good on third down with just standard concepts, standard run plays, standard pass plays. And Andy Kotelnicki's offense, just to rewind it all again, go all the way back around,
right,
is about blending the offensive pass and run game together so that players are put in conflict and they're not right no matter what they do. Creating spatial distortion and breaking rules that way. They have not been doing that as much in this first part of the season for whatever reason, whether or not they're trying to transition to a traditional offense to fit Aller, whether they're trying to save certain aspects they don't feel like they need in the first 3 weeks, or maybe they're working on those things to make sure that their base offense expands to include more of the playbook. I don't know, but I do know, having watched this offense last year versus having watched this offense in the first 3 games, there are elements they used last year that they have not been using, and a lot of that does come in the run game. Another thing I wrote about this week of kind of the specifics in there of some of the things we just outlined. And yes, to everyone in the chat, Aller hasn't kept the ball. That's absolutely true. There are just less of those opportunities than it seems like, based on what's actually a viable option handoff and what is not. Compared to the same team through the same number of games last year.
So edge time for the running backs for Penn State and Oregon. And I think the more I thought about this, and I'll write about the matchups more from a offense, defense, holistic standpoint, not so much the positions over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, but still was going through position by position to put that together. And if Whittington was healthy and was active the last couple of weeks, I think I'd feel maybe a little bit differently about this, but I don't always trust coaches when they say that a guy was close and that he could have come back and that he warmed up and they could have pushed it and so on and so forth. I just don't always trust that what you see is what you're getting there. And I'm sure he will be active and I'm sure he'll play, but without knowing exactly how that's going to look, I have to give the edge to Penn State on this particular one, T. Frank. But certainly this Oregon running backs room is nothing to sneeze at. And they're going to bring a group here capable of running the ball, and they have run it at times for sure. Maybe not as impressively in all instances yet as some fans would like, based on what I've read over on BWI's sister site, the Scoop Duck message board. But certainly no group, not a group to dismiss coming to State College from Oregon.
Yeah, it's closer than I would have expected, I guess, given the profile of Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. And truthfully, when watching Oregon's offense, I was focused more on the passing attack, more so than the running attack. And I was focused more on the offensive line than the running backs because they do kind of fit the mold of what I was expecting, just generally of kind of the style of running back. And, again, I think Lamar runs really hard and can break tackles. The edge is still clearly with Penn State. And I know this is funny to say, but they're both bigger backs. They both have size and speed. And I know Singleton's tackle breaking right now is literally the problem, but I do think that there is an advantage there from just the overall complete profile and body of work that if we haven't seen the best of the offensive run game yet, we're going to see that in this game for sure. So yeah, running backs, it's not a landslide, but it is an obvious advantage for Penn State in a tale of two good position groups.
All right, so far, T. Frank and I are split on who has to edge with the quarterbacks. We are in agreement that Penn State is the way to go with the running backs. Next up, receivers. I'm sorry, T. Frank. I saw your hand go up, and then I saw the graphic go up, and it threw me right out of sorts. Go ahead, buddy.
Oh no, I just need to be my own ombudsman. And Adavian Collins' dad is here to say, just want to correct something that I said about Adavian Collins. I think it was yesterday on Monday. He runs a 4.28. I said 4.39. I knew when it came out of my mouth it was wrong. I didn't know the exact specific number. But yeah. Much faster. I shaved off. I gave an extra tenth of a second. So I apologize for that. That was an incorrection that is worthy of being corrected. But I was talking about the matchup of speed in the secondary and the speed of the receivers for Oregon. So yeah, we'll save more of that conversation for tomorrow's show when we get into that particular matchup. But yeah, hit the receiver again. Let's reset and let's get back into this.
All right, so the Penn State receivers, obviously the talk of the offseason, bringing in multiple transfers. Liam Clifford is back as well. Those three Penn State transfers are the names to know, in addition to, again, Liam Clifford heading into this matchup. Oregon, of course, is always very active in the transfer portal. DeCorian Moore is a freshman receiver for them, who is turning heads very quickly as the former number 5 overall player in the class of 2025 in the Rivals. 300 for that most recent signing class, the number 1 receiver. Not a huge surprise, but I don't think I'm going to shock anyone, T. Frank, to start the bidding with this Oregon receiver conversation by saying they got some guys who know what to do when the ball is in their hands, and they know how to get open to get it.
Yeah, and let's just rip the Band-Aid off. This is the biggest mismatch, I think, and the clear advantage for Oregon is their speed and their playmaking explosiveness at receiver, because both teams have been working on this relatively the same stuff. Like Oregon's offense is short pass, screen pass, short pass, and then go deep, right? Vertical routes, isolation routes. They'll run all goes and then try to find the isolation route against a safety or a weak corner or something like that. And here's the thing. It's worked for them. It's worked really well. Now, the difference here is that Penn State, in jump ball situations, which one has the advantage? Kyron Hudson, bigger receiver. He's one of the biggest, most physical players in this matchup. Liam Clifford the same way. Penn State is 7 for 20 in jump ball situations this year in contested catches. They have not been good enough. They haven't been 50%. They haven't been 60%. They need to be that in this game to make up for the difference in what they lack in that downfield vertical stretch problem, because they just need to find ways to win on the outside. And it's very clear how Oregon is going to win and the threats they present. The difference in the question is Adavian Collins, A.J. Harris, L.A. Washington, that trio alone, let alone the rest of the secondary who have been playing well, is probably the best DB room they're going to see this year. And I'm just saying that blindly, not knowing their schedule and the other teams they're playing. You're going to have a hard time finding guys that have a combination of athleticism and skill set to take away some of that strength. And then it becomes, are they good enough in contested catch situations? They're 5 of 7 this year. They haven't had to do it, but when they have, they've been able to get the ball at the high point. And I think specifically Moore is a guy who shows that, and that's why I want to go to those back shoulder situations, because most back shoulders are also coincidentally a contested catch situation. By definition, you're throwing it, you're not trying to throw it away from contact. You're trying to throw it behind the DB who can slow down and be in position to at least get a hand near the ball. They've been good. How good are they? Penn State's going to have to show us where the weaknesses are in these receivers. We know where the weaknesses are on the Penn State receivers. We've seen that, where they've struggled with consistency. They've struggled with catching the football. They've struggled with contested catches. They've struggled with getting open deep. So, it has not been a clean non-conference season. You can point to the areas where that group has not lived up to what you would hope of with those 3 senior transfer receivers coming into the program. And that is besides and separate from individual from Drew Aller's struggles and his problems as a passer. That's, we'll get to that a little bit later, but that's kind of how I feel about the receivers in this particular matchup.
I mean, let me throw Steven's question to you. At the start of this segment, he said, Oregon has the edge in this matchup. I think we're all in agreement to that. But he said it's closer than last year. Agree or disagree?
I don't know. And this goes back to the whole, what are they not doing on offense? What are they actually good at? If they've been working on things they're not good at, what are they actually good at? I don't know that. And again, that's the bias of the information I have versus the information I don't have. I would love to know, where they are, if there are things they're not using on offense in the passing game. But here's the thing. They've targeted those receivers 50 times this year. I have a hard time thinking there's 50 other options that we haven't seen yet that are going to be a part of the core part of the playbook. So, yes, I will say yes. I don't think it's much closer than last year. Marginally closer.
And so I think that's another one of those conversations, to your point, we're going to have a better feel for. There's so many things, and I hate to keep going back to the same well over and over again, but it's just the reality of the matter. And I think Oregon fans, if there's any listening and want to chime in the chat, feel the same way, I think, to some extent about their team, maybe more on defense than on offense. But both teams so far, because of who they played, again, Oregon has had a tougher non-conference schedule than Penn State. Neither has faced the kind of opponent that some other teams in the college football playoff hunt have faced. But it's a question answering game. That's one of the reasons so many people are so excited about it. I think from a national perspective, it's 3 versus 6. It's a rematch of the Big Ten title game. It's more against Aller. It's the safeties and the standout defensive backs and pass rushers, all that stuff that excites people. But I think if you follow Penn State or Oregon, or if you're a fan of those teams, or if you're a reporter covering those teams like we are, it's about question answering and getting some relevant info that you just can't glean from the first 3, or in Oregon's cases, 4 games of the season. And, the Northwestern obviously probably provided them a little bit more intel than any of Penn State's opponents did. But at the same time, to the point you're making here, I think we're just going to learn so much more than we have about all of this. But it's an edge for Oregon until proven otherwise. And again, much like we talked about with the quarterback situation, Penn State's defense could shake this up pretty significantly, a group that is going to be tested. And you guys are going to talk about that a lot more tomorrow, of course, when you, Sean, and Ryan get together and do recruiting and talk about the defensive positions of note. There's
a 90-minute show there that I'm going to have to somehow trim down to at least 65 minutes. It's going to be insane.
Good luck. Good luck with that, my friend. All right. That's the receiver conversation, the one we've had all off season. It will be in focus all game and then all post game without question. And I'm fascinated to see it. Really actually excited to watch this Oregon group in person from that perspective, but also excited to see what Penn State guys do with the opportunities they have. They brought in 3 transfers to perform well and help win a game like this. So can they do it? We'll find out.
Yeah. And I think that there is upside here in the skill set of those 3 receivers, where it hasn't clicked yet. That was the point in the non-conference season, was trying to work on that chemistry. If they play better, if they do they do. The upside it is higher than I think what we saw from the team last year at the receiver position. We just haven't seen it yet, and past does not guarantee future, but we'll see.
All right, let's move on to a conversation and a position that dominated this matchup a year ago and Penn State's offense a year ago. It's the tight ends. So Penn State, obviously, in last year's game against Oregon, just like in last year's game against everyone else, T. Frank relied heavily on current Indianapolis Colts rookie standout Tyler Warren. He, of course, is no longer with the Nittany Lions, and Penn State has Khalil Dinkins at this spot, has Andrew Rapplier at this spot, and has productive sophomore, second-year Nittany Lion Luke Reynolds at this spot. For Oregon, it's pretty straightforward. If you look at the stat sheet and if you look at the film, it's Kenyon Sadiq, who I got to talk to at Big Ten Media Days, and I listened to him again this week. Awesome interview, awesome player. Jamari Johnson's another guy who they use at that spot. He has 5 catches for 49 yards this year. Kenyon has 9 for 155 and 3 touchdowns. So you obviously don't need the stats if you watch the film or vice versa to know which tight end this offense runs through. But really fascinating conversation here because this was a great battle last year when these two teams met. And obviously Penn State does not have a Tyler Warren at this point in time. But certainly I think there's some strong pieces in that tight end room, as we've talked about at length over the last 6 months. But Oregon comes to town with a fantastic tight end that I don't personally think gets enough attention nationally, regionally, in the Big Ten than he should.
So it's interesting because he's an explosive athlete. He's kind of what Khalil Dinkins, I thought Khalil Dinkins would be this year, as a guy who's on the freaks list and is super athletic, but has not really been involved in the passing game in a big way and hasn't really generated open targets or been good in contested catch situations. Like Kenyon Sadiq is the complete tight end in this game. Khalil Dinkins is a better blocker. There have been some people calling Sadiq the best blocking tight end or whatever. Like Dinkins is better. Dinkins is a better blocker. He's a more consistently impactful blocker. Sadiq is very good. I'm not trying to take away from that. But so if you're saying one tight end versus the other, yes, like that's the clear delineation. Luke Reynolds is a hyper athletic player. And again, bring up contested catches. He has not been as consistent as he had been previously of those crazy athletic contested catches. He's dropped a couple. He has had a couple batted away. On the whole, sure, Penn State has a deeper tight end room. Andrew Rappelier doesn't get enough credit for the job he's done as a receiver. And just being open, like it's hard to keep track of all 3 tight ends. But you want more from Khalil Dinkins in this game. One of the reasons is your Y tight end is going to get a better matchup than your flex tight end. So Luke Reynolds is lining up in the slot. There's no question he's going to be a receiving threat. When you've got Khalil Dinkins lined up as the Y, in line, blocking and blocking and blocking, you're expecting him to get a linebacker, and he should be athletic enough to beat a linebacker. And they've dialed some things up for him that just haven't worked yet. The question is, this is where I think if you're saying like we haven't seen some stuff to Khalil Dinkins or really to the tight ends beyond kind of the standard Drew Aller rhythm throws. So I'm wondering if there is more there to glean. The running backs and receivers, I think, is the area where there's more passing game to be mined. But there's no question, individually, Kenyon Sadiq is the best singular tight end. The group for Penn State, though, no question, is the higher threshold here and will play a lot in this game.
Yeah, I think if you were trying to go one-to-one comparisons, you would probably have a much longer conversation. But from the depth of the position and what this group can do versatility-wise, I think the edge does rest with Penn State here. But in terms of the impact on the game, just have to wait and see. To the point you made, a little bit disappointed with the start to the year that Khalil Dinkins has some drops, has had some opportunities to make plays and has not. Those can quickly be forgotten about in 60 minutes on Saturday or sooner, depending on if and when he makes those plays, T. Frank. Very curious to see what Luke Reynolds does. He was a hot topic when reporters were talking to both Dan Lanning and some players in Eugene this week. So, yeah, it's a fascinating thing to think about that Andy Kotelnicki obviously ran his offense through Tyler Warren and that tight end position last year. This year, it's been a little bit different through the non-conference slate. But again, that all could change this weekend too. So certainly interested to see how that all plays out on Saturday at Beaver Stadium. So any final thoughts on the tight ends?
Nope.
Alrighty then. Well, last position group for us on offense moves to the trenches. And I'm sure there's going to be some hot takes in the chat about this. The Penn State offensive line obviously returns a number of starters from a year ago, rotating plenty throughout the first portion of the season, the non-conference slate. A lot of guys getting snaps. Penn State came out of went into preseason camp rather trying to figure out its best 5 in terms of whether that meant Anthony Donko at tackle and Cooper Cousins or TJ Shanahan at guard, whether it meant something else with Nolan Rucci at right tackle and Anthony Donko at guard. So let me ask you this first, since we've started every other conversation here with Oregon. Initial impression of the Oregon blockers through 4 games so far.
They're good. They're, for the most part, athletic. which is, again, kind of a hallmark of Oregon, is speed everywhere. Their tackles, I think, are better than their interior players. Their center's pretty good. Their guards are not. I'm not super impressed by them. But what they are is they're big, they're physical, and they can move. Now, do they have the explosive power and strength to back it up like they did last year? I don't see that as much. So that is an area where they brought in Isaiah World, Alex Harkey at right tackle. Alex Harkey at right tackle is legitimately a beast. I saw him throw multiple players with one hand on like a technique where you just kind of swat a guy into the next gap. He's done that multiple times, just throwing dudes around. As a pass blocker, I think there's an opportunity there for Penn State to turn the corner on him. He does kind of give up a soft edge where he will drop his back foot. And if you can turn the corner on him, there's an opportunity there. And that's the question, is if Denai Dennis Sutton is that guy, can he bend to make that happen? Because he's got the power to do so. And on the other side, Isaiah Worlds is 6'8", 318, and his lower half makes Nolan Rucci look like he's a filled-out monster. It just, like, it's an interesting body type. And you've seen on film, not necessarily a guy who's going to be a mauler in the run game and move people. That being said, like against Chaz Coleman, Jalen Harvey, I think there could still be an advantage there for Penn State given who is going to be on the field. But overall, like I think that this is a step back. I think it's a pretty clear step back for Penn State or for Oregon's offensive line from their standard of last year, which was pretty darn good. Now, can they still make plays and help rip off runs if Penn State's not in their gaps? Yes, absolutely. They have enough athletic and size combination to open up gaps. But if we're talking about this is a dominant team, I don't see domination in the trenches for Oregon at all.
So that, of course, leads to the very obvious question of what do you see from this Penn State offensive line that encourages you after 3 weeks of play, and what discourages you after 3 weeks of play?
I think just to start with the tackles again, Drew Shelton hasn't been as clean as I expected. I expected a really strong senior season from him, and he's had, I'm just going to call him brain farts, whether he's not locked in the way he should be or whatever. He's allowed pressure around the edge that he just doesn't allow against guys that shouldn't turn the corner on him. And I don't know exactly why, but I don't expect that to happen in this game, truthfully. And then I still think Nolan Rucci on the other side is a little bit of a concern. I haven't seen... He physically, I don't think, got bigger and stronger in the offseason. I think he filled out a little bit better, but not to the level of being a different football player. Like I haven't noticed a different level of anchor in his game. And then kind of like Harkey, we talked about if you can get around the corner on Nolan Rucci despite the fact that he's 6'8". So that would the difference is, and this goes into the actual matchup on the field, even in last year's game, what Rucci struggles with is speed, and Oregon does not have speed rushers. They have power rushers. They're 275, 265. I know they've got a couple of different body types out there, but primarily their guys are tweeners. And I don't know that it will matter in this game because what those guys have struggled with is, speed to the outside. But that's what's concerned me. And then, just generally it's been a little bit sloppy, for especially the interior of the offensive line. And then in this game specifically, these are the concerns, right? So you asked about the concerns and the advantages. Last year, what Penn State did is they made Oregon run. Jamari Caldwell was a really good defensive tackle, but he's a big boy. Like, he's a big dude, and he wasn't exactly laterally nimble. So they got around him with Nick Dawkins. And the question is now, that's out of the bag. Oregon knows about that trick. Nick Dawkins is 295 on a good day. All of Oregon's defensive tackles are 330 plus, aside from Barry Alexander. Is Penn State going to be able to, is that one part of the offensive line going to cause an issue for Penn State in this particular matchup? We'll find out. But on the whole, Dawkins has played pretty well. I think Vega Ioane is the best singular offensive lineman in this game. I expect Drew Shelton to have a much better game. He's going to play well in this game. Anthony Donko has an opportunity to turn into a monster at some point if he stops thinking as much. Think he's thinking too much. So the upside for Penn State's offensive line is sky high. They are as talented as we talked about in the offseason. So playing fast, playing aggressive. I'd throw Donko in that bucket of players that James Franklin's talking about. Just go play. Just go hit somebody. Because when we saw him just to hit people last year, they were averaging at one point 9 yards a carry or 8 yards a carry when running behind Anthony Donko. That's the potential So we'll see if they can get to that in this game. But I think the advantage for me, Penn State offensive line all day, knowing that they're not actually going up against the other offensive line, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely, T. Frank. I'm right there with you. All right, let's move on now to a look at who needs to step up for Penn State in this game. So after 3 weeks of play, Penn State is 3-0. Not as bad as some would lead you to believe, but certainly plenty of things that they needed to clean up during the bye week. That was not just operationally from an offense, defense, and special teams perspective. That was not just for the coaching staff to do. Also some players as well who Penn State will need to step up against Oregon if they want to win this game and improve to 4-0 and keep a spot in the top 5 of the rankings heading into October. So we're not super short on time, T. Frank. We don't have a ton of time, but I know your list here starts with a receiver. Let me hear it.
Kyron Hudson. He's wearing number 1. They've essentially anointed him the number 1 wide receiver. And I just go back to individual plays that I just think should not happen. In the game against Villanova, Drew Aller decides pre-snap he's going to give his jump ball receiver a one-on-one opportunity down the sideline to catch a touchdown. And Kyron Hudson gets pushed out of bounds by a Villanova corner. I don't care if that player is going to go to the NFL. If you're Kyron Hudson, that cannot happen. That just cannot happen. You cannot be in a situation where they're trying to give him, Drew Aller is trying to evolve as a quarterback and give this element of the offense life. And some of the stuff is great. The sideline stuff where he's catching it with literally one toe in bounds, that's phenomenal. And that's the problem with what I saw at USC with Kyron Hudson is the highlights are exceptional. But the individual, like down-to-down play, whether it's not getting open or in these contested catch situations, not being as good and having too many of them because he's not getting open, these are the things where you are hoping for an improved level of play. And so, sometimes guys get better and sometimes they are who they are. In this particular game, we need to see more of those highlight catches. We need to see more of those staying in bounds, going up top, and catching the ball up high. Obviously, there has to be some changes. We'll get to more of this a little bit later, but to me, it's all 3 of the transfer receivers, but specifically, if we're calling Kyron Hudson the possession receiver, the guy that you need to have locked in to give Drew Aller a security blanket, it's Kyron Hudson. He's got to play better in this game than he has in the first 3 games.
All right, I'm going to stay on offense with my first pick, and I'll make it the easy one. It's Nick Singleton for Penn State. I think that we've seen, obviously, throughout his career and throughout some moments, but not many, this year, that Nick Singleton just, can change the game at a moment's notice. Katron Allen's just had more of them. He will likely have some, or if not many, moments in this game. But Nick Singleton is a key part of this offense, and another gear is there for him. And Stan Drayton spent all offseason talking about that. And it's time to find it in this game. So does not need to be perfect by any means, but the more they can get out of him, both as a pass catcher potentially and as a running back, obviously, when you're not averaging, 2.5 to 3 yards a carry, over 20 anyway, would certainly be a big deal. So that's where I start my list, and I'll let you move on to your next one.
Yeah, Amari Campbell, I don't think he's been bad this year, but there have been brain farts. There have been times he's run off in the wrong direction, and this is more of he's been good, but no mistakes. Just no mistakes in this game, because as we talked about with this offense and this matchup, I think Penn State needs to control this particular game with as few resources in the box as possible to allow their secondary to shut down the passing attack. And to do that, you need your linebackers to play clean. So no missed tackles. He missed a bad tackle. And somebody in the chat was talking about Penn State's run defense and Oregon's run defense. And I guess that's the thing, is there's been missed tackles and missed assignments that are baked into some of those yards that you see on the stat sheet. But when Penn State has been on their game, they have looked very, very good, and they've been able to stop a lot of stuff. So Amari Campbell, been good, needs to be great in this game. So he needs to step up to that next level of consistency.
Yeah. So my next one is the other safety. And I think obviously we saw King Mack move into that role over the course of the non-conference after Antoine Belgrave-Shorter won it out of preseason camp. But also they say it's going to be a continuing competition. So whoever wins that job, or quote unquote the starter for the week, I guess you could say, needs to be as reliable as Wheatley is. And I think that Penn State, as we've talked about ad nauseum, has not had to deal with a passing attack that threatens it. But when it does, that other guy, we know what Wheatley is going to do when he's put in passing pressure situations. Whoever the other guy is that's out there with him must step up and carry his share of the load. I'm going to change my last one to your last one as well, because we're on the same page. And it's as obvious it gets. It's being run down in the chat. It's Drew Aller.
Yep. Yeah, he's got to be good. Like, no bad Drew. No bad Drew in this game. And that means not missing the easy ones, but then not letting the easy ones that he misses affect the other throws in his game. I go back to the FIU game where I felt like the plan of attack was to throw and get Devontae Ross involved, and there was a certain level of he was too hyped up. He knew the game plan. This is my opinion of like watching his personality on the field, that got into his head of like, I need to be perfect today because we're throwing the ball down the field. I want to show that I'm this guy, and then you overthink some stuff. So just like be in rhythm, be water, right? That's all the phrase. Just be water in this game, and he'll be fine. I don't think he has to step up and be the first-round draft pick. He just has to be the guy who plays within himself, plays calm, and all that other stuff is going to happen. He knows where everyone is on the field. He understands the assignments. He understands the coverages. He knows the game plan for Oregon, most likely, as good as the other team. He just has to go out there and let what he knows show on the field. And that has been a struggle for him at time, and we'll see if he can step up and do that.
All right, let's wrap things up with this week's edition of Best Bets. Here on the BWI Live.
You got it. You're
All
good.
right, now we're back in business. Can't be muted for this. Weekly Best Bets segment from BWI, and on this edition of BWI Live comes from BetMGM. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code ON3, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code ON3, O-N the letters, and the number 3. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code ON3, O-N, capitalize the number 3. When you sign up, make this college football season one for the history books and make it legendary. T. Frank, this is a bounce back week for me, I hope, because there's been a little bit of a rocky start here. I thought the first week went well. The last couple have been a little bit dicier. So
I think I know where you're going with some of these. Yeah, so you go for it. But I want to know if I got to see if I'm right with where you're going. So get us going.
Okay, here's the first one. And you kind of hinted at this earlier in the show, but Oklahoma State, somebody in the comments did as well. Obviously, a mess. Fire Mike Gundy. I love when you get to back a team, and I realize that they don't have as much roster talent as everybody else that they will play this year. Certainly, Oregon showed us that. But they're going to face Baylor in this week, and I think that the number is up to 20.5 now. I just love getting involved on the side of a team that is rallying in its locker room. You're hoping that's what it's doing anyway, and it's coming together, and it just lost its head coach, and that usually can shake things up in a locker room and so on and so forth. So give me the points here. It's a spot bet. There's not really anything else. I think based on what we've seen from Oklahoma State, certainly there's enough concern warranted about what they're capable of, but also just like the spot anytime you get in a situation like this.
And that's a big number, almost a 3 touchdown advantage. And
I think
obviously that's on purpose.
Too. Yeah,
really?
I think it'll keep going up too. Yeah, it would not shock me if that breaks 21. We'll see, but certainly
interesting what you. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just I'm curious about Missouri here. I can't wait. 44.5 points for Missouri against UMass. Like on the other side of playing with confidence, the Drew Aller, Bo Prabula, the what about Bo all season. What are you doing with this one? I'm fascinated to know.
Just getting people riled up to talk about Bo Prabula. I mean, there's not really anything more or less to it. No, I look at it like this. Temple put up 42 on UMass. Iowa put up 47 on UMass. And now the Minutemen are going to play this Bo Prabula attack. And I know it's not been perfect at all points this year, but I can just see them getting out to a very fast start with Bo and with some of the other playmakers in this offense, getting up pretty big quickly, and then letting the second team put things away from there. A little bit concerned about the second team and the rest of the quarterback situation there, but I just think this is a game Missouri and Bo Prabula win pretty handily. It has the makings of like 50-3, 50, something along those lines. So the number's big. There's no question about it. It scares me a little bit. These numbers always do. But I just see what Iowa and Temple did points-wise against this UMass team. And I think by far Missouri should be able to outscore both of them. And the defense will have to hold up for me late.
All right. Game of the week. Penn State,
Oregon.
Penn
State,
What's
Oregon.
Up?
So I will have my prediction along with yours at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com on Thursday. Some more rationale and reason behind this, but I'm not interested in laying the points with Penn State 3.5. Currently, the number at BetMGM. If it was a 3, I'd be a little bit more interested. But just give me the money line. Penn State minus 170. As I will write in my prediction tomorrow, and probably not as confident about this pick today as I was maybe in July or August when we first made our season predictions. Pick Penn State to win then. Don't know if I've seen enough from either side yet to fully change my prediction at this point in terms of who wins, but my feeling of how the game will go and maybe what the final score will be, T. Frank, I think has changed, but not who wins the game. So that's my last best bet of the week, and that's from BetMGM.
All right. Appreciate that. I love having the Greg Pickles best bets here on the BWI Live Show.
See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, and 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer now for new customers only. Subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are not withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days. In partnership with Kansas Crossings Casino and Hotel.
Alrighty, so that will do it. We played a little bit of overtime on this Wednesday edition of BWI Live, but we are getting out of here. Plenty of coming for you here on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel or your podcast feed, and also, of course, at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Let me give you a quick rundown. Practice notes and observation tonight, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. $1 to sign up. Join us at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for those. T. Frank will have plenty of more analysis and info from the practice field and also just on this game, Penn State, Oregon in general. Picks and predictions coming up later this week. Obviously, recruiting coming up both here on the BWI YouTube and channel and podcast feeds with Ryan and Sean on Thursday, joining T. Frank to talk about the massive recruiting weekend coming for Penn State. Ryan Snyder has a story up for subscribers at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Really encourage you to go check it out. Inside look at how Penn State put this just ridiculous weekend together. So check that out. $1 for a week at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Final thoughts, Steve Frank?
Practice coming up tonight, as you mentioned, and then the tailgate show at 4:30 on Saturday. Come say hi. We'll be live outside the Bryce Jordan Center ticket office, just a stone's throw away from Beaver Stadium and all the festivities. Game day is going to be there. We're probably going to look like a tick buried on the side of their setup, but we'll be there. So they're going to have hundreds of people. We'll have tens of hundreds of people walk by and say hello. So come say hi.
Yes, go see T. Frank. Go see us at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. We'll be back here tomorrow. The guys will be back for recruiting and more Penn State, Oregon talk. Until then, be sure to hit like and subscribe on this video on the channel. As T. Frank tells you now, you can hype the video. I'm still not 100% sure what that means, but I do it every time. Me either. And don't forget to subscribe at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. That's Thomas Frank Carr. I'm Greg Pickle. We'll talk to you next time. It's another edition of BWI Live in the books.